The slap came so fast I didn't have time to brace for it. The stinging sensation on my left cheek burned hotter than the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. My vision blurred for a second, and when it cleared, Tilda Sterling was dangling a Rolex in front of the two security guards flanking her. Heavy, gold, and studded with diamonds that caught the light like tiny daggers. "I told you she was trash," Tilda screamed, her face twisted in a performance of outrage so convincing it was terrifying. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her designer shoe. She was preying on my poor, disabled stepson, stealing from a man who can't even hear her thieving footsteps. "I didn't take it," I yelled back, my voice cracking with desperation that clawed at my throat. "I was helping him. He isn't deaf. He can hear you. He heard the frequency." The words tumbled out in a rush, and I knew immediately I'd made a mistake. Tilda's eyes went dead cold. The performance dropped for just a second, and I saw the real woman underneath, calculating, vicious, and absolutely terrified of what I knew. She leaned in close, so only I could hear her next words over the guard's heavy breathing. "If you ever say that word again," she whispered, her breath hot against my ear, "I will bury you so deep the law won't find you for a decade." Then she shoved me backward, and I stumbled into the arms of the nearest guard. His grip was iron on my bicep. "Get her out of my house," Tilda commanded, her voice rising back to that theatrical pitch. "And make sure no agency in this city ever hires her again. I want her name blacklisted. I want her destroyed." As the guards dragged me down the marble steps of the Sterling estate, my feet barely touching the ground, I looked up at the third-floor window. Rhodes was there. His hand was pressed against the glass, fingers splayed wide. He wasn't staring blankly at the sky like he had for the past 3 years. He wasn't frozen in that terrible, vacant expression I'd seen every day for the past 2 weeks. He was looking at me. His eyes were clear, alert, desperate. And in that moment, I understood everything. This wasn't about a stolen watch. This was about silencing the one person who knew the truth. "My name is Cleo, and 10 minutes ago I cured a billionaire. Now I'm about to lose everything." I sat on the curb outside the estate gates, rain soaking through my gray maid's uniform until it clung to my skin like a second layer of shame. My phone was buzzing in my pocket, probably my agency calling to fire me, but I couldn't bring myself to answer it. I just needed a moment to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. I need to explain how this happened, how I ended up here, soaked and jobless and scared out of my mind. I'm an audiology dropout, not because I wanted to quit, but because life doesn't care about your dreams when bills need paying. I was 3 semesters away from my degree when my dad got sick, really sick. Stage 4 lung cancer. The treatments weren't covered by insurance, and the medical bills piled up faster than I could count them. I had to make a choice, finish school or keep my father alive. It wasn't really a choice at all. So I dropped out and took whatever jobs I could find. I worked at a coffee shop, a grocery store, a call center. Nothing paid enough. Then I saw the listing, domestic staff needed for Sterling estate. Discretion required. Pay, double standard rate. I took the job the same day I interviewed. The Sterlings were one of those old money families you read about in magazines. Rhodes Sterling was supposed to inherit a multi-billion-dollar empire, tech companies, real estate, venture capital funds. He was the golden boy, handsome, brilliant, destined for greatness. Then 3 years ago, he had a car accident. The official story was that he hit a patch of ice on a mountain road and rolled his vehicle down an embankment. He survived, but barely. The doctors said he'd suffered severe head trauma. He was declared medically deaf and catatonic, unable to speak, unable to respond, trapped in his own body. His stepmother, Tilda, took over as his conservator. She controlled everything, his medical care, his finances, his entire life. Everyone called him the Silent Prince, the tragic heir locked in a tower, unable to claim his kingdom. I was hired to clean his room and help with his basic care. It was supposed to be simple. Go in, dust, change sheets, make sure he was comfortable. Don't expect communication. Don't expect anything. but something felt wrong from the first day. I'll never forget the first time I walked into Rhodes Sterling's room. It was on the third floor of the estate, at the end of a long hallway that always felt colder than the rest of the house. The door was heavy oak, and it creaked when the head housekeeper, Mrs. Vance, pushed it open. "This is where you'll work," she said, her voice flat. "Mr. Rhodes requires complete quiet. No music, no television, no unnecessary noise. He's very sensitive." The room was beautiful but sad, all dark wood and expensive furniture that no one used. Heavy curtains blocked most of the natural light, and in the center, facing the window, was a wheelchair. Rhodes sat perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap. He was wearing high-tech hearing aids, sleek black devices that looked more like earbuds than medical equipment. His eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. "Does he ever move?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Vance shook her head. "Not in the 2 years I've worked here. The doctors say there's almost no brain activity. Ms. Tilda keeps hopping for improvement, but—" She trailed off with a sad shrug. I was left alone with him. I started dusting, moving quietly around the room, trying not to stare. But I couldn't help it. He was young, maybe 27 or 28. Handsome in that privileged way, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair that probably cost more to cut than I made in a week. But it was his eyes that bothered me. They weren't completely empty. Every so often, I thought I saw something flicker behind them, a flash of awareness, of frustration. I told myself I was imagining it. Then, on my third day, I noticed the sound. It was faint, so faint I almost missed it. A high-pitched whine, like the noise old TVs used to make. It seemed to be coming from his hearing aids. I moved closer, pretending to dust the table beside his chair. The sound got louder. It wasn't amplification. It wasn't processing audio. It was a steady, poolsing tone that made my teeth ache. I'd studied enough audiology to know what that was. A jamming signal, white noise designed to scramble neural pathways. His hearing aids weren't helping him here. They were making sure he couldn't. I spent the next week trying to convince myself I was wrong. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was just feedback. Maybe I was so desperate to find meaning in this awful job that I was inventing conspiracies where none existed. But the sound never went away. Every time I cleaned his room, there it was, that relentless, high-pitched whine. I started researching. Late at night, after my dad fell asleep, I'd pull out my old audiology textbooks and search online forums. I learned about neural suppression technology, about frequencies that could interfere with brain activity, about experimental treatments that had been banned because they were too dangerous. The more I learned, the more convinced I became. Rhodes Sterling wasn't deaf. He was being kept in a digital sound prison. But why, and by who? The answer to the second question was obvious the more I watched Tilda move through the house. She was always there, always hovering, always controlling every aspect of Rhodes's care. She personally delivered his medications. She personally selected his medical team. She personally approved every person who entered his room. And she was spending his money like water. New cars, expensive jewelry, renovations to the estate that cost millions. She needed Rhodes silent. She needed him incapacitated, because if he woke up, she'd lose everything. I knew I should walk away, mind my business, keep my head down and collect my paycheck. But I couldn't, because every time I looked at Rhodes, I saw my father, helpless, dependent on others for care, trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate. And I thought about how terrifying it would be if my dad was conscious through it all, aware but unable to speak, unable to ask for help. I had to do something. So I made a plan. The opportunity came on a Tuesday morning. Tilda had left for a business trip to New York. Mrs. Vance was supervising the gardeners. The house was as empty as it ever got. I slipped into Rhodes's room with my cleaning supplies and my phone. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the tuning app I'd downloaded, a simple program that could generate specific frequencies and measure sound waves. Rhodes was in his usual position, staring at nothing, the hearing aids emitting that awful whine. "I'm going to try something," I whispered, even though I didn't think he could hear me. If this works, if you can understand me, I need you to give me a sign. Okay. Nothing, no response. I walked to the grand piano in the corner of his room, a beautiful instrument that probably hadn't been played in years. It was covered in dust. I ran my finger along the keys, and they made a soft, discordant sound. I pulled out my phone and opened the tuning app. I needed to find the exact inverse frequency of the jamming signal. If I could generate a counterfrequency, theoretically, I could cancel out the white noise long enough for his brain to function normally. It took me 20 minutes of careful listening and adjustment. I isolated the primary frequency, 440 Hz with a harsh overtone. The counter would be 432 Hz mixed with a C-sharp dissonance. I looked at Rhodes one more time. His eyes were still empty. Here goes nothing, I muttered. I pressed play on my phone. The counter frequency filled the room, a low, haunting chord that seemed to vibrate in my chest. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Rhodes gasped. It was a sharp, desperate intake of breath, like someone breaking the surface after being held underwater. His whole body jerked, his hands unclenched. His eyes, those empty, vacant eyes, suddenly focused with an intensity that made me step back. He turned his head, slowly, deliberately. And he looked at me. Not through me, at me. "Oh my God," I whispered. "You're awake." For a moment, we just stared at each other. Rhodes's chest was heaving, his breathing rapid and panicked. His eyes were wide, darting around the room like he was seeing it for the first time in years. Tears started streaming down his face. I moved closer, my heart pounding. "Rhodes, can you hear me?" He tried to speak, but only a strangled sound came out. His throat probably hadn't been used for real speech in 3 years. The effort seemed to exhaust him. "It's okay," I said quickly. "Don't try to talk, just nod if you can understand me." He nodded, once, sharp and certain. Relief flooded through me. The hearing aids, they're not helping you, are they? They're hurting you. Another nod. His hand reached up shakily toward the devices, but he seemed unable to remove them himself. "Someone put them there," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Someone is keeping you like this on purpose." His eyes squeezed shut, a third nod, more desperate this time. "Tilda," I breathed. At her name, Rhodes's eyes snapped open. The expression on his face was pure terror mixed with rage. He grabbed my wrist, his grip weak but urgent. He pulled me closer, and I could see he was trying desperately to communicate something. His mouth moved, silent at first, then barely audible, a rasp. "Echo." "Echo," I repeated. "What does that mean?" He shook his head, frustrated, his grip tightened. "Echo 7. Echo 7, is that a code?" "Blue Ridge, Vault." The words came out in fragments, each one seeming to cost him tremendous effort. "Echo 7 Blue Ridge Vault." "I don't understand," I said. "What's Blue Ridge?" But before he could answer, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, confident, familiar. Tilda was back early. Rhodes heard them too. His eyes went wide with panic. He released my wrist and gestured frantically at my phone, still playing the counter frequency. I understood. I stopped the sound. Immediately, the jamming signal from his hearing aids reasserted itself. Rhodes's eyes began to glaze over. His body went slack. Within seconds, he looked catatonic again. But his hand moved one more time. Subtle, barely noticeable. He pointed under his pillow. I didn't have time to check. The door opened. Tilda stood in the doorway, her designer coat still draped over her shoulders. She looked at me, then at Rhodes, then back at me. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice pleasant but cold. "Just dusting, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't expect you back so soon." "Change of plans." She walked into the room, circling me like a predator. "Has my stepson been agitated at all today?" "No, ma'am, same as always." She studied Rhodes's face carefully. He stared blankly ahead, giving nothing away, but I could see a slight tension in his jaw. Tilda noticed it too. "Interesting," she murmured. Then she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think I'd like you to empty your pockets, dear." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry." "Your pockets," Tilda repeated, still smiling that terrible smile. "Empty them now." "I don't understand. I haven't." "Security," she called out, and immediately 2 large men appeared in the doorway. Where had they been? Had they been waiting this whole time? "I haven't done anything wrong," I protested, but my hands were already moving to comply. I pulled out my phone, a tissue, a pen. "The apron pocket too," Tilda said. I reached into the front pocket of my maid's apron. My fingers touched something cold and metallic that definitely hadn't been there when I'd gotten dressed that morning. I pulled it out. A Rolex, gold and studded with diamonds, unmistakably expensive. I started, but Tilda was already screaming. "I told you she was trash. She was preying on my poor, disabled stepson, stealing from a man who can't even hear her thieving footsteps." That's when she slapped me. Everything happened fast after that. The accusations, my desperate attempts to explain, the guards grabbing me, being dragged down the stairs. But in that chaos, while Tilda was performing her outrage for the security team, I saw Rhodes one more time. He was still in his chair, still looking catatonic to anyone who didn't know better. But his hand had moved. While Tilda's back was turned, he'd pulled something from under his pillow and dropped it on the floor near his wheelchair, right where it would roll toward me as I was being dragged out. An old MP3 player, scratched and dented, something no one would think to look for. As the guards hauled me past his chair, I grabbed it. I palmed it so smoothly even I was surprised. I shoved it into my sock just as they threw me out the front door. Now, sitting on the curb in the rain, I pulled it out and stared at it. Whatever was on this device, Rhodes had risked everything to get it to me. "Echo 7 Blue Ridge Vault," I whispered. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I was going to find out. I made it back to my dad's apartment soaked to the bone and shaking. Not from the cold, from adrenaline and fear and the horrible certainty that my life had just been destroyed. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. I finally looked at it. 12 missed calls from my employment agency, 7 text messages, all saying the same thing: I was fired. My contract terminated immediately. Due to theft and misconduct, I was being blacklisted from every domestic staffing agency in the city. Tilda had worked fast. But that wasn't all. There was a voicemail from my landlord, Mr. Chen. I listened to it with growing dread. "Ms. Cleo, I've received a complaint about criminal activity associated with your residence. I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you and your father to vacate the premises within 48 hours. I'll return your deposit minus cleaning fees." Criminal activity. She'd even gotten to my landlord. I sank onto the couch, the MP3 player clutched in my hand. Tilda wasn't just firing me. She was scorching the earth. She wanted me homeless, desperate, too busy surviving to think about what I'd discovered. But she'd made a mistake. She didn't know about the MP3 player. My dad shuffled out of his bedroom, wrapped in his bathrobe. He looked frail, so much frailer than he'd been 6 months ago. The cancer was winning. "Cleo, you're home early. What happened?" He saw my face and his expression fell. "Baby, what's wrong?" I couldn't tell him everything. The stress might kill him, so I lied. "Just some mix-up at work. Nothing I can't handle. How are you feeling?" "Never mind me. You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Dad. Really, just tired. I'm going to rest for a bit, okay?" He didn't believe me, but he was too exhausted to push. He nodded and shuffled back to his room. Once his door closed, I pulled out my beat-up laptop and plugged in the MP3 player. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely connect the cable. The device loaded. Instead of music files, there was a single folder labeled Evidence. Inside were hundreds of audio files, each one dated, each one labeled with times. I clicked on the most recent one, from yesterday. Rhodes's room, the sound of footsteps, then Tilda's voice, sharp and clear. Sign the papers, Rhodes, or I turn the frequency up until your brain melts. A pause, then a sound I hadn't heard before, Rhodes's voice. Weak and slurred. Never. Oh, you'll sign. Eventually. Everyone breaks. You're just stubborn. I clicked on another file, from 2 months ago. Tilda and someone else, a man with a smooth, professional voice. Dr. Calloway, I realized, Rhodes's personal physician. How much longer can we keep this up? Dr. Calloway asked. As long as necessary, Tilda replied. The conservatorship hearing is in 6 months. Once he's declared permanently incompetent, I'll have full control of the estate. Then we can discuss your compensation. And if someone discovers the truth about the accident? They won't, I made sure of that. I played file after file, dates going back 3 years. Rhodes had been recording everything, every conversation, every threat, every piece of evidence. He'd been conscious this whole time, trapped, tortured, aware but unable to move or speak or ask for help. The jamming frequency kept him paralyzed. The drugs kept him weak. And Tilda kept him prisoner so she could steal his billions. I had to sit down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. This wasn't just abuse. This was torture. This was a hostage situation disguised as medical care. And I was the only person who knew. I spent the whole night listening to the files. By the time dawn broke, I'd heard enough to make me physically sick. Tilda's crimes went far beyond just keeping Rhodes sedated. She was embezzling from his companies, selling off assets, making deals with people who sounded like criminals, money launderers, cartel representatives, corrupt politicians. But the worst file was from 3 years ago, the night of the accident. Tilda's voice was cold and clinical. The brake line is cut. Make sure it looks like an accident. I don't care if he survives, but I need him incapacitated. Understood. Understood, ma'am. And the driver. Collateral damage, can't be helped. They'd tried to kill him. When that didn't work completely, they'd imprisoned him instead. I had to get this evidence to someone, the police, the FBI, anyone. But first, I needed to understand the code Rhodes had whispered to me. Echo 7 Blue Ridge Vault. I searched online for anything connecting Blue Ridge to the Sterling family. Nothing came up at first. Then I remembered something Mrs. Vance had mentioned in passing, the family driver, Weston. He'd worked for the Sterlings for decades. He'd driven Rhodes everywhere before the accident. If anyone knew about Blue Ridge, it would be Weston. The problem was finding him. Tilda had probably fired him too, erased anyone loyal to Rhodes. I checked social media, old employee directories, anything I could find. Finally, I found a grainy photo from a charity event 2 years ago. The caption listed all the staff members. There he was. Weston Reeves, Sterling family driver. A quick search gave me an address, not far from here, but when I called, the number was disconnected. I'd have to go there in person. I checked on my dad, still sleeping, and left a note saying I'd be back soon. Then I grabbed the MP3 player, the laptop, and what little cash I had left. I took the bus to Weston's last known address. It was a small house in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place that had seen better days. But when I knocked, no one answered. I was about to leave when I heard a voice behind me. If you're looking for Weston, try O'Malley's bar. He's there most afternoons. An elderly woman was watering her flowers next door. She gave me a sympathetic look. Thank you, I said. O'Malley's was 3 blocks away, dark, dingy, and smelling of old beer and regret. I found Weston in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and staring at nothing in particular. He looked up when I approached. His eyes widened. You're the girl from the estate, he said. The new maid. What are you doing here? I need your help, I said. It's about Rhodes. Weston's whole body went tense. He looked around the bar nervously, like he expected Tilda's security team to burst through the door at any moment. I can't talk about the Sterlings, he said quickly. I signed an NDA. They'll sue me into oblivion if I say anything. Rhodes is being tortured, I said bluntly, and I have proof. That got his attention. He stared at me for a long moment, then gestured for me to sit. "Show me." I pulled out the MP3 player and one earbud. I played him the file from the accident, Tilda ordering the brake line cut. His face went pale. "Dear God," he whispered. "I knew something was wrong, I knew it. But they fired me right after the accident, paid me off, made me sign papers saying I'd never talk about it." "Do you know what Blue Ridge means?" I asked. "Rhodes said something about Echo 7 Blue Ridge Vault. Does that mean anything to you?" Weston's eyes lit up with recognition. "Blue Ridge, it's a cabin, up in the mountains. Rhodes's grandfather built it decades ago as a private retreat. Rhodes used to go there when he needed to think. He loved that place." "Does Tilda know about it?" "She sold it 2 years ago, said there was no point keeping it since Rhodes couldn't use it anymore." He paused. "But there's something you should know. Before he sold it, Rhodes had a private server installed there. Said he was backing up important files, things he didn't want stored on the company servers." My heart started racing. A vault, a digital vault. "That's right." Weston leaned forward. "If he gave you that code, he wants you to access it. Whatever's on that server, it's important enough that he risked his life to tell you about it. Can you take me there?" He hesitated. "Cleo, if Tilda finds out I'm helping you, she'll destroy me. She has resources I can't even imagine. Private investigators, lawyers, people who make problems disappear." "I know, but Rhodes has been locked in that room for 3 years, conscious and aware, while she tortures him and steals everything he owns. If we don't help him, who will?" Weston stared at his whiskey for a long moment. Then he knocked it back in one gulp and stood up. "My car's out back. Let's go." We left through the rear exit. Weston's car was an old sedan that had seen better decades, but it ran. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in the side mirror. A black SUV was pulling out behind us. "Weston," I said carefully, "don't look now, but I think we're being followed." He checked his rearview mirror and cursed. "How did they find us so fast?" "Tilda has eyes everywhere. You said it yourself." The SUV was keeping pace with us, staying 2 cars back but definitely tracking our movements. "Hold on," Weston muttered. He made a sudden right turn without signaling. The SUV followed. He turned left, then left again. The SUV stayed on us. "This isn't just surveillance," he said grimly. "They're hunting us." Weston's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. He pulled a sharp U-turn in the middle of the street, tires squealing, and shot down a narrow alley between 2 apartment buildings. "What are you doing?" I yelped, grabbing the door handle. "Losing them." The alley was barely wide enough for 1 car. We scraped against a dumpster, sending trash flying. Behind us, the SUV tried to follow but got stuck between the buildings. I heard the crunch of metal against brick. Weston didn't slow down. He burst out the other end of the alley and immediately turned into a residential neighborhood, winding through streets at random until we were completely lost. Finally, he pulled into a grocery store parking lot and killed the engine. We both sat there, breathing hard, adrenaline pumping. "They're not just private security," Weston said after a minute. "Those were professionals, maybe ex-military. Tilda isn't playing around." "We can't use your car anymore," I realized. "They probably have the license plate." "I know," he thought for a moment. "We'll take the bus. It's slower but harder to track." We abandoned his car in the parking lot and walked to the nearest bus stop. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that SUV or another one just like it. "How far is Blue Ridge?" I asked. "About 40 miles, up in the mountains. We'll need to take 2 buses and then hike the last few miles." This was insane. I was running from armed mercenaries to break into a cabin that didn't even belong to Rhodes anymore, all based on a code whispered by a man being held prisoner. But what choice did I have? Rhodes had trusted me. He'd given me the evidence. He'd given me the code. I couldn't let him down. We rode the first bus in silence. I kept the MP3 player in my pocket and my hand on it constantly, terrified of losing it. Weston pulled out his phone and started searching for something. After a minute, he showed me the screen. "The Sterling Foundation Gala," he said. "It's this Friday, big charity event. Broadcast live on local TV." So that's where Tilda is going to make her move. She's been laying the groundwork for months. She's going to announce that Rhodes is permanently incapacitated and that she's taking full legal control of the estate. I felt sick. Once she has full control, she doesn't need to keep him alive anymore. Weston nodded grimly. Exactly. We had 3 days. 3 days to get the evidence, figure out how to use it, and stop Tilda before she won everything. We reached the mountain base as the sun was setting. The second bus dropped us off at a tiny town that was barely more than a gas station and a diner. From here, Weston said, we had to hike. The trail was steep and overgrown. Clearly, no one had used it in years. My legs burned and my lungs ached, but I kept going. Weston, despite being in his 60s, moved with the steady pace of someone who'd done this hike many times before. "Rhodes used to make me drive him up here at least once a month," he said as we climbed. "He'd stay for days sometimes, said it was the only place he could think clearly." "What was he like before the accident?" Weston smiled sadly. "Brilliant, kind, nothing like his stepmother. His father married Tilda when Rhodes was 18. Even then, Rhodes didn't trust her. He used to joke that she'd married his dad for the money, not love. Turns out he was right." "What happened to his father?" "Heart attack, 5 years ago. That's when Tilda really showed her true colors. She tried to convince Rhodes to sell the company, invest in her schemes. He refused. I think that's when she started planning the accident. We hiked in silence after that. Finally, just as the last light was fading from the sky, we reached the cabin. It was smaller than I expected. Just a single-story structure with a stone chimney and large windows looking out over the valley. The new owners clearly hadn't used it much. The windows were dark, and there were leaves piled against the door. "How do we get in?" I asked. Weston walked to a large rock near the entrance and rolled it aside. Underneath was a small metal box. He opened it and pulled out a key. "Rhodes always kept a spare," he said. The cabin was dusty and cold, but otherwise intact. Weston found the breaker box and flipped the power on. Lights flickered to life. I looked around. The main room had a fireplace, a couch, a small kitchenette. Nothing that looked like a server room. "Where would he keep it?" I asked. Weston walked to the fireplace and pressed on a specific stone. There was a click, and part of the wall swung inward, revealing a small hidden room. Inside was a desk, a chair, and a server rack humming quietly in the corner. And on the desk was a keypad with a small screen. "Echo 7, I whispered. I typed it in. The screen flashed, partial access. Biometric verification required. "Biometric," Weston said, "like a fingerprint." I stared at the screen. We need Rhodes. We need his actual fingerprint to unlock the vault. Weston and I looked at each other in dismay. "We can't get to him," I said. "Tilda will never let us near him again." "Then we're stuck." But even as he said it, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered hesitantly. "Hello." "Cleo." The voice was raspy, weak, barely audible, but I recognized it instantly. "Rhodes." "How are you calling me?" I whispered. "Burner phone, hidden, limited time." Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. "They're moving the timeline, the gala, Friday. She's going to announce permanent incapacitation, full power." "I know. I'm at Blue Ridge, but I can't access the vault without your fingerprint." A long pause, then, "Come back tonight, service entrance. Shift change. 10 p.m. I'll be ready." "Rhodes, that's insane. If Tilda catches me." "Only chance, trust me." The line went dead. Weston and I made it back to the city by 9:30 p.m. We didn't have a plan beyond "don't get caught." I'd stolen a catering uniform from a delivery truck parked behind a restaurant. It was too big, but it would have to do. The service entrance to the Sterling estate was around the back, used by delivery people and maintenance workers. At 10 p.m., during shift change, the guards would be distracted. That was our window. "Are you sure about this?" Weston asked for the 10th time. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." At 9:58 p.m., I walked up to the service entrance like I belonged there. A delivery van was unloading supplies. I grabbed a box and followed the workers inside. The guards barely glanced at me. I was in. The back hallways of the estate were a maze of corridors I'd never seen before. I tried to remember the layout, to figure out how to get to the 3rd floor without being spotted. The sound hit me before I reached the stairs. That high-pitched whine from the hearing aids. It was louder here in the hallway, making my skull ache. I couldn't imagine living with that sound inside my head 24 hours a day. I climbed the back stairs, my heart pounding. At any moment someone could appear, a guard, a housekeeper, Tilda herself. But the hallway was empty. I reached Rhodes's door and tested the handle. Unlocked. I slipped inside and closed the door silently behind me. Rhodes was in his wheelchair, facing away from me. The hearing aids were emitting that terrible frequency at full volume. Even from across the room, it made my teeth hurt. "Rhodes," I whispered. Nothing, he didn't move. I pulled out my phone and played the counter frequency. Immediately, Rhodes gasped. His body convulsed. He grabbed the arms of the wheelchair. I rushed to his side. "I'm here, I'm here." He turned to look at me, tears streaming down his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out at first. "The drugs," he finally rasped. Increased dosage, hard to think." "I need your fingerprint," I said, pulling out the portable scanner Weston had bought at an electronics store. "For the vault." He held out his shaking hand. I pressed his thumb against the scanner. "Access granted." "Got it," I whispered. "Rhodes, I'm going to get you out of this, I promise." He grabbed my wrist. "Friday, Gala Shiel." The door handle turned. I dove under the bed, my heart stopping. I switched off the counter frequency. The door opened. I could see expensive shoes, Tilda's, and medical sneakers. Dr. Calloway. "He seems agitated tonight," Dr. Calloway said, his voice professionally concerned. "I noticed." Tilda walked closer to the wheelchair. "Up the dosage. I want him completely out of it for the gala, no risks." "That's a very high dose, Miss Sterling. It could cause." "I don't care what it could cause. 2 more days and I won't need him conscious ever again. I can ship him to that facility in Switzerland and be done with this charade." I had to cover my mouth to stop from screaming. I heard the clink of a syringe. Rhodes made a small sound, pain or protest, I couldn't tell. "There we go," Dr. Calloway said. "He'll be out for hours." They left. I waited until their footsteps faded completely, then crawled out from under the bed. Rhodes was unconscious in his chair, head lolling to the side. I wanted to shake him, to wake him up, to run away with him right now. But I couldn't. He was too heavily drugged, and carrying an unconscious man through the estate would get me caught immediately. I had to leave him behind. "I'm sorry," I whispered, touching his hand. "I'm so sorry, but I'm going to fix this, I swear." I slipped out the window and climbed down the trellis outside, the same route I'd used to escape on my first night. My hands were shaking so badly I almost fell. At the bottom, I heard a shout. "Hey, you!" A guard had spotted me from across the lawn. I ran. I scrambled over the back wall of the estate, cutting my arm on the stone, but I didn't stop. I hit the ground on the other side and kept running, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I could hear the guard calling for backup. Dogs started barking. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing in an alley 3 blocks away. My arm was bleeding. My uniform was torn, but I had the fingerprint data. I called Weston. "Got it, meet me at the motel." The motel was a cheap place on the edge of town that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Weston had paid cash for 3 nights. When I arrived, he took one look at me and started first aid on my arm. "What happened?" "Got spotted, barely made it out." I pulled out the scanner. but I have what we need. We connected the scanner to the laptop and accessed the Blue Ridge server remotely using Rhodes's fingerprint data. The vault opened. Inside were thousands of files, financial records, emails, documents, and 3 video files labeled insurance. I clicked on the first one. It was security footage from the night of the accident. High-quality, hidden camera. It showed Tilda meeting with a mechanic in a garage, money changing hands. The mechanic working on Rhodes's car, specifically, cutting the brake line. The second video was from 6 months later. Tilda and Dr. Calloway in his office, discussing the hearing aid modification that would keep Rhodes sedated. The third video was the worst. Tilda on the phone with someone, speaking in a language I didn't recognize, but Weston did. "That's Spanish," he said quietly. "She's talking to someone about money laundering, moving funds through offshore accounts." I searched through the financial records. It was worse than I thought. Tilda wasn't just embezzling. She was laundering money for a drug cartel. That's why she needed total control of the Sterling Empire. The company was her washing machine for dirty money. If Rhodes woke up, if he took back control, she didn't just lose her lifestyle. She'd lose her partnership with some of the most dangerous people in the world. "She'll kill him," I said. "Once the gala is over and she has legal control, she'll have him killed and make it look like complications from his condition." Weston's face was grim. "We have to get this to the police." "Which police?" I pulled up a news article on my laptop. "Look." It was from that afternoon. A photo of Tilda shaking hands with the chief of police at a fundraiser. "She owns them," I said. "The local cops won't help us. They're probably on her payroll." "Then what do we do?" I thought about it. "We can't use the law. It's too slow, too corrupt. We need to use the truth, publicly, where she can't hide it." "The gala," Weston said slowly. "The gala," I agreed. "It's broadcast live, hundreds of witnesses. If we can expose her there, she can't make it disappear." "How?" I started planning. "You said you know the audio guy for the event." "Yeah, Marcus. He's done their events for years." "Can you get me in, as part of the tech crew?" Weston pulled out his phone. "Let me call him." Marcus agreed to hire me as a last-minute audio technician, no questions asked. Weston had saved his job once years ago, and Marcus owed him a favor. "Just keep your head down," Marcus said when I met him Friday morning. "Don't draw attention, do your job, that's it." The gala was being held at the Sterling estate itself, in the massive ballroom on the first floor. I arrived with the tech crew at noon to set up. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, tables draped in white linen. A stage had been constructed at one end, with a podium and microphone for speeches. I wore a headset and a baseball cap pulled low over my face. I kept my head down and focused on running cables and testing audio levels. Tilda was there, directing the decorators and caterers like a general commanding an army. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than I'd make in a year. She looked like royalty. She looked like a killer. At 4 p.m., they brought Rhodes in. He was in his wheelchair, dressed in an expensive suit, looking like a mannequin. 2 attendants pushed him to a spot near the stage where he'd be visible to the cameras, but not in the way. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to scream the truth to everyone in that room. But I had to wait. I had to be patient. The guests started arriving at 6 p.m. Wealthy donors, politicians, business leaders, the cream of society, all there to celebrate the Sterling Foundation and its charitable works. All there to watch Tilda steal everything. At 7 p.m., the live broadcast began. Cameras focused on Tilda as she took the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice warm and gracious. "Thank you all for being here tonight. As many of you know, the Sterling Foundation was founded by my late husband to give back to our community. Since his passing, it has been my honor to continue that legacy." She paused for applause. "Tonight, I have an announcement that breaks my heart," she continued, her voice catching with practiced emotion. My stepson, Rhodes, has been fighting his condition with such courage for 3 years, but the doctors have informed me that his condition will never improve. He will never wake up. He will never speak again. The audience murmured sympathetically. As such, I am formally requesting legal guardianship to make medical decisions on his behalf and to ensure the Sterling Foundation can continue its important work. I was at the sound board, my hands on the controls. I had the audio files loaded and ready to play. The recording of Tilda ordering the break line cut, the recording of her discussing the torture. But when I tried to play them, the system locked up. Error, file blocked by security protocol. Panic flooded through me. Tilda's security team had installed a firewall. I couldn't play the digital files. "What's wrong?" Marcus whispered, noticing my distress. "I can't play them. The system's locked." "Can you bypass it?" I tried. I failed. The security was too sophisticated. Tilda was still talking, describing Rhodes's condition, painting herself as the devoted stepmother making impossible choices. I had one shot, and I just lost it. I stared at the locked sound system, my mind racing. Digital wouldn't work. The firewall was too strong. But there was another way. I looked at the stage. Next to the podium was a grand piano, positioned there for a performance later in the evening. The frequency, the counter-frequency that had woken Rhodes, I could play it manually. "I need to go on stage," I told Marcus. "What? No, you can't. Trust me, please." Before he could stop me, I left the sound booth and walked toward the stage. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Tilda was mid-sentence when she saw me. Her eyes went wide with recognition, then narrowed with fury. "Security," she called, her composure cracking. "Get her." But I was already at the piano. I sat down, my hands finding the keys by muscle memory from my childhood lessons. "You," Tilda shrieked, pointing at me like I was a demon. "Get her out of here." 2 security guards started toward the stage. I slammed my hands onto the keys. The chord rang out, harsh, dissonant, piercing. Not beautiful music, but a specific frequency. 432 Hz with a C-sharp overtone, the exact inverse of the jamming signal. The audience covered their ears. The sound was unpleasant, almost painful to hear. But Rhodes's head snapped up like he'd been electrocuted. His whole body went rigid. The hearing aids in his ears started squealing as the feedback loop destroyed the jamming signal. He reached up with shaking hands and ripped the devices out, throwing them on the floor where they sparked and died. The ballroom went silent. Rhodes was sitting up straight in his wheelchair, his eyes clear and focused for the first time in 3 years, in front of hundreds of people, on live television. "That's impossible," Tilda whispered. Rhodes turned to look at her. The expression on his face was pure, concentrated fury. The security guards grabbed me, pulling me away from the piano. "Arrest this maniac," Tilda screamed, her voice shrill. But then Rhodes spoke. "Stop." The voice was deep, raspy from 3 years of disuse, but it boomed through the silent ballroom with unmistakable authority. Everyone froze. Rhodes stood up, slowly, shakily, but he stood. He took a step forward, then another. He walked to the microphone on the stage. Tilda looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Rhodes, darling, you're confused. You're not well. Let me." "Let her go," Rhodes commanded, pointing a trembling finger at me. The guards released me immediately. He turned to face the audience and the cameras. "My name is Rhodes Sterling. For 3 years, I have been held prisoner in my own home by my stepmother." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She tried to kill me once," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "When that failed, she kept me sedated and deaf using illegal neural suppression technology. She tortured me. She stole from me. She used my companies to launder money for criminal organizations." Tilda tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Weston stepped out of the crowd and blocked her path. "Play the recording, Cleo," Rhodes said, his eyes meeting mine across the stage. "The one from November 4th. I ran back to the sound booth. The firewall was still active, but Marcus was already working on it. "Got it," he said suddenly. "Some kind of master override, go." I hit play. Tilda's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear. "The break line is cut. Make sure it looks like an accident. I don't care if he survives, but I need him incapacitated." The audience erupted. Shouting, gasps, people pulling out phones to record. Tilda stood frozen in the center of the room, all color drained from her face. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. Police, state police, not local, poured in, led by a grim-faced detective. "Tilda Sterling, you're under arrest for attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy." "This is a setup," Tilda screamed as they handcuffed her. "That recording is fake. He's confused. He's been in a coma." "Save it for your lawyer," the detective said. As they dragged her toward the doors, she looked at me with pure hatred. "You destroyed everything." "No," I said quietly. "I saved the one thing that mattered." They took her away. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Reporters swarmed Rhodes, asking questions, snapping photos. He held up a hand for silence. "I need medical attention," he said simply. "Real medical attention, not the kind my stepmother provided, if you'll excuse me." Paramedics came forward with a stretcher, but Rhodes waved them off. "I can walk." He made his way through the crowd, people parting for him like he was Moses at the Red Sea. When he reached me, he stopped. "Thank you," he said, "for hearing me when no one else could." "I just played the right frequency," I replied, my voice breaking. "You did more than that. You gave me my life back." He kept walking, flanked by paramedics. I watched him go, tears streaming down my face. Weston appeared at my side, grinning. "You did it, kid. You actually did it." The next few hours were a blur. Police statements, interviews, the media circus was overwhelming. By midnight, I was back at the motel, exhausted and overwhelmed. My phone had died from all the messages and calls. There was a knock on the door. I opened it to find a woman in a business suit. "Ms. Cleo, I'm Rhodes Sterling's attorney. He'd like to speak with you tomorrow if you're available. He has a proposition." I met Rhodes the next day at the hospital. He was in a private room, surrounded by real doctors running real tests. He looked exhausted but more alive than I'd ever seen him. "Cleo," he said when I entered, "thank you for coming. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been asleep for 3 years." He smiled weakly. "The doctors say I'll make a full recovery, some physical therapy, some psychological counseling, but I'm going to be okay." "I'm so glad." "I owe you everything," he continued. "You risked your life for mine. I want to repay that." "You don't owe me anything." "I disagree. I've been thinking about what to do, and I have an idea." He pulled out a folder. "You were studying audiology before you had to drop out, correct?" I nodded, surprised he knew that. "I want to pay for you to finish your degree. Full scholarship. And when you graduate, I'd like to offer you a position as the head of a new foundation I'm creating, the Sterling Foundation for Hearing Recovery. We'll research new treatments, help people who can't afford hearing aids, and make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else." I couldn't speak. Tears were running down my face. "Also," he added with a slight smile, "your father's medical bills, paid in full. He'll get the best care money can buy." "Rhodes, that's too much." "It's not enough. It will never be enough to repay what you did." He held out his hand. "What do you say? Want to change the world with me?" I took his hand. "Yes, absolutely yes." 6 months later, Tilda's trial concluded. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the video footage, the financial records showing years of embezzlement and money laundering. She was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Dr. Calloway got 20. The corrupt police chief lost his job and was under investigation. Rhodes took back control of his companies. He fired the entire board that had enabled Tilda's corruption and installed new leadership committed to transparency and ethics. The Sterling Foundation for Hearing Recovery opened its doors 3 months after the gala. I was there for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. my diploma from the audiology program framed on the wall of my new office. My father was there too, looking healthier than he had in years. The experimental treatment Rhodes had paid for was working. The cancer was in remission. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Dad said, hugging me tight. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," I replied. Rhodes gave a speech at the ceremony, his voice clear and strong. He talked about second chances and the power of listening, really listening to people who needed help. When he was done, he caught my eye and smiled. After the ceremony, we stood together looking out at the city. "Do you ever think about that night?" I asked. "When I first played the frequency?" "Every day," he said. "That was the moment I knew I was going to survive. Not just physically, but really survive. Get my life back." "What made you think of recording everything?" I asked. "Keeping all that evidence?" "My grandfather," he said. "He always said, truth is the best weapon against lies, but only if you can prove it." So I recorded everything, every threat, every conversation. I didn't know when or how I'd use it, but I knew someday I'd need it. "And the MP3 player, how did you keep it hidden?" He smiled. "Tilda thought I was catatonic. She stopped checking my room carefully after the first year. I had time to hide things, to plan. The MP3 player was in a hollow space I'd carved into the back of my wheelchair. The burner phone was in a loose floorboard. I was preparing for the moment someone would finally hear me." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "I almost walked away and minded my own business." "But you didn't. You heard that frequency when no one else did. You understood what it meant. You saved my life." We stood in silence for a moment. "So what's next for you?" I asked. "Rebuilding," he said. "The company, my life, my trust in people." He looked at me. "But also, I'm thinking about expanding the foundation. There are so many people trapped in situations they can't escape. Medical abuse, financial abuse, legal systems that don't protect them. I want to help them too." "That sounds perfect." "And you, what's next for Cleo?" I thought about it. "I want to research new frequencies, new ways to help people with hearing loss. And I want to make sure that the technology that was used to hurt you is never used that way again." "We'll do it together," he said. "Partners." "Partners," I agreed. 1 year after the gala, I walked into my office at the Sterling Foundation to find Rhodes waiting for me with coffee and pastries. "Good morning, Cleo," he said, smiling. Those words, simple, ordinary words, still made me smile. After 3 years of silence, every word Rhodes spoke felt like a small miracle. "Good morning, Rhodes. What brings you by so early?" "I have something to show you." He pulled out a tablet and handed it to me. "We just got approval for our first major research grant. $50 million to study neural auditory processing and develop new treatments for hearing loss." I stared at the numbers. This is incredible. It gets better. We're partnering with 3 major universities and 2 research hospitals. We're going to help thousands of people. I felt tears prick my eyes. A year ago, I'd been a disgraced maid with no prospects and a dying father. Now I was leading groundbreaking research and changing lives. "How's your dad doing?" Rhodes asked, as if reading my mind. "Really good. He's been cancer-free for 6 months. His doctors are calling it a miracle." "That's wonderful." We sat together, drinking coffee and planning the future. It felt comfortable, natural, like we'd been doing this forever instead of just 1 year. "Can I ask you something?" Rhodes said after a while. "Of course." "That day you first played the frequency, did you know it would work, or were you just guessing?" I thought about it. I knew the theory. I'd studied neural suppression in school, but did I know for sure it would wake you up? No, I was terrified it might hurt you worse. "But you did it anyway." "I had to try. You deserved that much." He looked at me for a long moment. "You're remarkable, Cleo. I hope you know that." I felt my face flush. I just did what anyone would do. "No, most people would have walked away. You fought." The foundation grew rapidly over the next year. We opened 3 clinics, funded dozens of research projects, and helped over 5,000 people get access to hearing aids and treatments they couldn't afford. Rhodes and I worked together every day. He handled the business side, fundraising, partnerships, public relations. I handled the medical and research side, vetting projects, working with doctors, developing new programs. We made a good team. One evening, we were working late in my office, reviewing grant applications. It was past midnight. Everyone else had gone home. "We should probably call it a night," Rhodes said, rubbing his eyes. "Just one more," I replied, focused on the application in front of me. This one is from a researcher in Boston who's developing a new cochlear implant technology. It could help children who were born deaf. Rhodes came around the desk to look over my shoulder. As he leaned in to read, I caught the scent of his cologne. My heart did a stupid flutter. I'd been trying to ignore the growing feelings I had for Rhodes. It was unprofessional. He was my boss, my benefactor. My friend. Getting romantic would complicate everything. But he was also kind, brilliant, and shared my passion for helping people. How was I supposed to not fall for him? "This looks promising," he said, his voice close to my ear. "We should fund it." Agreed. He straightened up but didn't move away. "Cleo, can I ask you something personal?" My heart started racing. "Sure." "Why did you really help me? And don't say it's because anyone would have done it. I want the real reason." I turned to face him. He was standing so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Because I know what it's like to be helpless," I said quietly. "To be trapped in a situation you can't control. Watching my father get sicker, not being able to afford treatment, having to drop out of school, I felt powerless. When I saw you in that room, trapped and conscious but unable to speak, I saw myself. I had to help you because I knew how much I would have wanted someone to help me." "And now," he asked, "why do you stay? You could work anywhere. You don't need me anymore." "I stay because this work matters, and because—" I hesitated. Because I like working with you. You make me want to be better, do more, help more people." He smiled. "You make me want to be better, too." We stood there for a moment, the air between us electric. Then Rhodes stepped back. "We should go home," he said. "Get some rest, big day tomorrow." Right, yes, of course. But as we left the office together, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. 3 months later, the foundation held its first annual fundraising gala. Not at the Sterling estate. Rhodes had sold that property and all its terrible memories. Instead, we held it at a beautiful hotel downtown. I wore a dress Rhodes had insisted on buying me, elegant but not too fancy. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "As I'll ever be." We entered the ballroom together. The event was packed. Donors, researchers, medical professionals, families we'd helped. Everyone wanted to support the foundation. I gave a speech about our work and the impact we'd had. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Rhodes took the stage next. "A year and a half ago, I was a prisoner in my own body," he began. "Today, I'm free, and I'm using that freedom to make sure others trapped in impossible situations get the help they deserve." He talked about our programs, our research, our plans for expansion. "But none of this would exist without one person's courage," he continued. "Cleo, would you come up here?" I walked to the stage, confused. "Cleo saved my life," Rhodes told the crowd. "But more than that, she showed me what real strength looks like, what real compassion looks like. She's the heart and soul of this foundation." He turned to me. "Which is why I'd like to announce that as of today, you're no longer just the head of research. You're my partner, co-director of the Sterling Foundation." The crowd erupted in applause. I stood there stunned. "Partners?" Rhodes asked, holding out his hand. "Partners," I agreed, shaking it. But as our hands touched, something passed between us, something more than professional respect. After the gala ended and the guests filed out, Rhodes and I stood on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Thank you," I said, "for everything, for believing in me. Thank you for saving me, for giving me a second chance at life. You would have saved yourself eventually. You're too stubborn to stay trapped." He laughed. Maybe, but you made it happen sooner. You gave me hope. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Cleo, Rhodes said finally, I know this might be inappropriate. I know we work together and there's a power dynamic and 100 reasons this is a bad idea. But I have to tell you, I have feelings for you, real feelings, and I have for months. My heart stopped. Rhodes. You don't have to say anything, he continued quickly. I just needed you to know, and if you don't feel the same way, we can pretend I never said anything and go back to being colleagues. I won't let it make things awkward. Rhodes, I said again, stop talking. I kissed him. It was gentle and sweet and perfect. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling. I have feelings for you too, I whispered. I've been trying to ignore them for months. Why? Because I didn't want to mess up the best thing in my life. This foundation, our partnership, your friendship. What if we could have all of that and more? He asked. Then I'd say we should try. We kissed again, and this time it was deeper, more certain. We'd both been trapped in our own ways, him literally, me by circumstances and fear. But we'd freed each other, and now we were building something beautiful together. Not just a foundation, not just a partnership. A future. 2 years after the gala incident, Rhodes and I stood in front of the newest Sterling Foundation clinic, cutting the ribbon for the grand opening. We were partners in every sense, professional and personal. We'd been dating for over a year, taking things slow, building a relationship on the foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. The clinic was in a low-income neighborhood that desperately needed hearing services. We'd be providing free hearing tests, affordable hearing aids, and access to specialists for anyone who needed help. This is number 7, Rhodes said as we toured the facility. 7 clinics in 2 years, you should be proud. We should be proud, I corrected. This is our work, not just mine. He smiled and kissed my forehead. Our work, I like the sound of that. My father was at the opening too, looking healthier than he had in 5 years. The cancer had stayed in remission. He was even volunteering at one of our other clinics, helping with administrative work. My daughter, the foundation director, he said proudly, hugging me. Who would have thought? Not me, I admitted. 2 years ago, I was cleaning rooms and trying to figure out how to pay rent. And now you're changing the world. After the ceremony, Rhodes and I drove to our favorite coffee shop, a small place near the foundation's main office where we'd had our first real date. I have something for you, Rhodes said as we sat down with our drinks. He pulled out a small box. My heart started racing. Relax, he said, laughing. It's not that, not yet anyway. Inside the box was a key. What's this? A key to Blue Ridge. I bought the cabin back. I thought we could use it as a retreat, a place to get away from the craziness and just breathe. I smiled. That sounds perfect. There's something else. He pulled out a folder. I've been working with my lawyers on something. I want to set up a permanent endowment for the foundation. $500 million, enough to keep us running forever, regardless of what happens. Rhodes, that's your inheritance. It's our future. I want to make sure the work continues, and I want to make sure you're taken care of no matter what. What do you mean, no matter what? He took my hands. I mean that I love you, Cleo. I'm going to ask you to marry me someday, not today, but someday soon. And when I do, I want you to know that this foundation, this work we've built together will always be ours, protected and secure. Tears streamed down my face. I love you too. I know, he said, smiling. You tell me every morning when you walk into my office. Because it's true every morning. We sat there, holding hands, planning our future. 2 people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes. 5 years after that first frequency played in Rhodes's room, we stood together on the stage at a medical conference in Boston. We were presenting our research on neural auditory processing, research that had led to breakthroughs in treating various forms of hearing loss. Our work had helped thousands of people hear for the first time or regain hearing they'd lost. None of this would have been possible without the courage of one person, Rhodes said to the audience of researchers and doctors. My wife, Dr. Cleo Sterling. We'd gotten married 2 years earlier in a small ceremony at Blue Ridge Cabin, with just our closest friends and family. My father had walked me down the aisle, healthy and proud. After the presentation, we were swarmed with questions and congratulations. Other researchers wanted to collaborate. Medical device companies wanted to license our technology. Universities wanted to partner with the foundation. It was overwhelming and wonderful. That night, back in our hotel room, Rhodes and I collapsed on the bed, exhausted but happy. We did it, I said. We actually changed the field. You did it, he corrected. I just funded it. You did more than that. You believed in it, in me. In all of it. He pulled me close. Easiest decision I ever made. Do you ever think about that day? I asked. The day I played the frequency. Every single day. It was the day my life began again. Mine too, I admitted. I was so lost before I met you. No direction, no hope, just surviving. And now? Now I'm living, really living, doing work that matters with the person I love. Speaking of which, Rhodes said, reaching for his phone, I got an interesting email today. The Nobel Committee wants to put us forward for consideration for our work on auditory neural processing. I sat up. Are you serious? Completely. I mean, it's a long shot, but the nomination alone is incredible. I lay back down, my mind reeling. From disgraced maid to Nobel nominee in 5 years, it seemed impossible. But then again, so did waking a deaf billionaire with a piano chord. You know what the best part is? I asked. What? Every morning I wake up and you're there, and you can hear me when I say good morning. That's better than any award. He kissed me. Good morning to you too, Dr. Sterling. We fell asleep wrapped around each other, two people who'd been trapped in different ways but found freedom together. 10 years after the gala, Rhodes and I returned to that same hotel ballroom for the Foundation's anniversary celebration. So much had changed. We now had 23 clinics across the country. Our research had led to 3 FDA-approved treatments. We'd helped over 50,000 people access hearing care. And we had a 4-year-old daughter, Maya, who was running around the ballroom with the other kids, her hearing aids, the most advanced technology we'd developed, barely visible in her ears. She'd been born with profound hearing loss, but thanks to our research and the implants we'd pioneered, she could hear perfectly. She's beautiful, my father said, watching her play. He was in his 70s now, but still healthy, still cancer-free. She is, I agreed. Rhodes joined us, Maya in his arms. Someone wants to say hi to Grandpa. Hi, Grandpa, Maya signed and spoke simultaneously. We taught her sign language too, believing every person should have multiple ways to communicate. Hi, sweetheart, Dad said, taking her from Rhodes. Want to help me get some cake? They wandered off, leaving Rhodes and me alone. 10 years, he said. Can you believe it? Barely. Sometimes I still feel like that scared maid who stumbled onto a conspiracy. You were never just a maid. You were always remarkable. I just helped you see it. We helped each other, I corrected. He put his arm around me. Do you remember what I told you that night at the first gala, about having feelings for you? I remember everything about that night. I told you I'd ask you to marry me someday, and I did, but I never told you the rest. What rest? That I'd fallen in love with you the moment you played that frequency, when you looked at me with such determination and hope, even though you were risking everything. That's when I knew, this woman is going to change my life. You changed mine too, I whispered. We changed each other. We saved each other. We stood there, watching our daughter play, surrounded by the evidence of the life we'd built together. A foundation that helped thousands. A family we'd created. A love that had survived impossible odds. I thought about that day 10 years ago, standing in Rhodes's room with my phone, about to play a frequency I wasn't even sure would work. I'd been so scared, so uncertain. But I'd pressed play anyway. And that single moment of courage had changed everything. "Thank you," I said to Rhodes. "For what?" "For giving me a reason to be brave. Thank you for hearing me when no one else could." We kissed, and Maya made a disgusted sound from across the room. Mommy and Daddy are being gross again." We laughed. 10 years ago, Rhodes Sterling thought he was deaf. He thought his life was over. He thought he'd never speak again. 10 years ago, I was a desperate maid with no future and a dying father. But we found each other, we saved each other, and we built something beautiful from the ashes of our pain. The Sterling Foundation would continue its work long after we were gone. The research would save countless lives. The clinics would serve communities for generations. But for me, the greatest achievement was this. Every morning I woke up next to the man I loved, and I heard him say, "Good morning, Cleo." And every morning, I said it back. Because we could both hear, we could both speak, we were both free. And we were home.